Before we go to John, I would like to invite the sponsor of the evening, Arcadis. Martin, can you please come to the stage?
Goedenavond.
Goedenavond. And maybe say a few things about Arcadis.
We're the proud sponsor of tonight's drinks, especially that it's held for you and for the new chairman. So thank you very much for offering us this opportunity to be the sponsor. Just as 2 words of reminder, Arcadis, we're consultants and engineers in 4 main business lines: in environment, water, infrastructure and buildings. So if you drive to Poznań, we designed this motorway. If you're going to go to Racibórz, we designed the water reservoir. Actually, this building, we were double-checking the construction design of the Intercontinental, and I can go volumes about it. So to avoid embarrassing silence, I think we should pass the mic to the speaker of tonight, John.
The other bands have played and now I get to come on, and I'll try not to keep you too long because you probably had enough of the earlier speeches that you don't want any more from me, or too much from me. Thank you for the invitation. I came because I have written a book about my 20 years in Poland, a memoir. The story started a good deal longer than that because I was a war correspondent. I worked for Time magazine. I covered wars throughout the world. And one day I was in Lagos in Nigeria, and I was going to see a colleague and friend of mine and a good source of information at the American Embassy. When I got there, the consulate is right next to the embassy, and I walked down the line and I saw this very pretty girl, and I always say hello to pretty girls, so I said hello to her, and what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like that, like this, or something very corny, and she was Polish. All Polish girls are very pretty. So I asked her if she would marry me. Well, actually, that was much later. But she was very impressed with me because she was waiting for a visa, trying to get a visa to the United States, and I knew the Consul General very well, and I said, listen, I said, look, I'll see what I can do for you. So I went into the embassy and I saw the Consul General. I said, look, there's this very pretty Polish girl. This was during the communist era, so Polish people were not as welcome as they are around the world. Can you do something? And he did, and she had a visa the same day, and normally it took 2 or 3 days, and she was totally impressed with me. She said, wow, what a fixer. What else can she do, she asked. What else? Later on, I also showed her what a really good fixer I was because I was the bureau chief for Latin America, and I often used to go to Panama. And one time I was in Panama, and I had a long interview with General Noriega, who was at that stage the president of Panama. And I had several times asked Anya, who by then was my wife, to get a visa to come down to Panama. We were living in Mexico City. And she said, look, I hate the Panamanians. I've been to the embassy 5 times, and they've told me to get out because they don't want any communists, because Poland was a communist country, in our fine country. I mean, Panama is not really known for its human rights and democracy and things. So at the end of this interview, General Noriega said to me, Mr. Borrell, let me know if there's anything I can do for you. He was hoping I would say, can you get me girls or boys or drugs or something? And I said, well, Mr. President, there is. Could you organize a visa for my wife, who's in Mexico City, so she can come down here and we can whoop it up in your fine country? He said, Mr. Borrell, I told him, I said there'd been problems, and he said, Mr. Borrell, you come back, you tell your wife to go tomorrow. And I called my wife, and I said, listen, I think I've sorted out the visa. She said, I'm not going there. They're horrible to me. And I said, listen, just go. I think I've sorted it out. She went the next day. The ambassador came running out the minute she walked into the embassy. Mrs. Borrell, there's been a terrible, terrible mistake. Please come into my office. Do you want a multiple entry visa? Do you want a lifetime visa? Do you want a passport? And she was totally impressed with this, of course, you know. She said, how do you do it? And I said, well, I've got contacts. So the story started there. We lived together in different places. We lived together when I was covering the Middle East. We lived in Cairo. We lived in Vienna when I was covering the Balkans and the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. And one day, she comes from near Gdańsk, and one day I was with her at her family's Działka, just outside of Gdańsk. It's on a beautiful lake. And I'd spent 27 years as a war correspondent, mostly as a war correspondent, always as a foreign correspondent throughout the world, in Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, everywhere. Every horrible place that you can think of, I've been to, I promise. Some of them I've been to several times, which was not a very smart thing. And I decided, look, I've had enough. I was covering the war in Bosnia. It was a nasty war, and I said, look, I've covered 16 or 18, I can't remember how many wars in the last 20 years. They all end in tears, because all wars do. And why am I doing it? I'd lost a lot of friends who had been killed in various places. They used to shoot you in those days. Now they cut your head off, but it's still the same effect. So I said, look, why don't we build a place on this beautiful lake, and we can come and live in Poland. This was after the collapse of communism. It was possible to do things. And she was very reluctant because she liked living in different places. I had been offered posts in Tokyo and Beijing and places like that, and she was looking forward to going there. And I said, no, I've had enough. I'm tired of being shot at. I'm tired of working through the nights, not having dinner, filing the story at 3 o'clock in the morning. Let's build this. So we eventually started. And I wasn't terribly well equipped for this because, you know, my wife can't negotiate anything. And I had to go to the farmers to negotiate the purchase of the land. I had to buy 5 pieces off 12 pieces of 5 different farmers. But while I was doing this, my Polish then was non-existent. It's not brilliant now, but hey, we can talk in Polish if you like. In 20 years, it will be more or less perfect. I've just got to live that long. I asked my wife one day, look, I've got to negotiate. I need to learn Polish. And I asked her one day, how do you say envelope in Polish? So she told me, koperta, because I needed to buy 2 big envelopes. So I went off to the nearest town, and I went into the shop, and I wasn't exactly sure. So I said to the lady behind the counter, poproszę pani dwie duże kobiety. Which, any of you who don't speak Polish, what I had said, instead of give me 2 big envelopes, I'd said give me 2 big women. There is a difference. But then I made it worse, because I was thinking, she looked at me nonplussed, and as if I was stupid, and I thought, well, look, I want 2 big envelopes. How do you explain to somebody 2 big envelopes? And I thought about it very quickly. This is a story I can't tell in front of my children. But then I went, how do you explain, you know, an envelope? So I think then there was a special button under the counter that you call the police when a foreign sex maniac comes into your shop. And I had to get out of that shop really quickly because I could hear the sirens coming. And even today in Kartuzy, I walk on the other side of the street and I have a newspaper up like this so that she'll recognize me. She'll say, you know, that's the sex maniac who came in here 20 years ago. And my Polish did get a little bit better because I realized, hey, listen, you can't go around doing that kind of thing. Yeah, it's bad for your image. But I had to negotiate with 5 different farmers for 12 pieces of land to have the contiguous 10 hectares roughly that we have and we built the lodge on. And to do this in Kashubia, you have to go and put a bottle of vodka on the table in the kitchen and negotiate. And normally it's a half a liter. And they said, "Oh, but you're a foreigner, you're rich." And this was the perception in those days, 20-something years ago, that every foreigner was rich. Of course, they picked on the only one who wasn't rich, and that was me. And they said, "But you're rich, you're a foreigner, you have to put a liter on the table." So I was negotiating for the purchase of this land with a liter bottle of vodka on the table. There's only two of us. That's quite a lot of vodka. And in Kashubia, you don't put the cork back on, the top back on. You drink it to the end. The problem was, I stayed the course, having been a university student in New Zealand. You learn these kind of things. You learn how to drink and other life skills. But at the end of some of these drinking sessions, the worst thing was that I couldn't remember whether I was buying or selling. The good thing was that the farmer couldn't remember whether he was selling or buying. Eventually, we sorted it out, and I bought the land. We built this lodge. I see many faces here have been to the lodge. We've been there for 20 years. It's the most beautiful place in Poland. I'm allowed a very quick advertisement. It's wonderful. But it was very difficult to build because at that time in Poland, corruption was much more rampant than it is today. And also in rural areas in Poland, in small towns, it was much, much worse because there didn't exist a press or anything like that. So I had lots of problems to build the various parts of this lodge. And eventually I got so fed up with dealing with the local układ that I started a newspaper of my own. Having been a journalist, I know how to start newspapers, I know how to write, but I had to teach the journalists how to write, and I had to teach the journalists, most importantly, how to report. So this newspaper started, and I fought the local układ. I got rid of the mayor. I got rid of various other corrupt officials. So needless to say, if you come and see me in Kashubia, anywhere you go around and talk to anybody in officialdom, they will say, "Ah, John, that nice man." Because most of them are without jobs at the moment. Better that if you come to Kashubia, don't tell them that you know me, okay? And don't tell them you're staying at Kanya Lodge. Anyway, this was a 24-page newspaper. We fought corruption. We did achieve a lot. And we changed some of the politics of the place. In the meantime, because I don't like not being busy, I started a wine company. We import wine from all over the world. We're one of the biggest companies in Poland. And more recently, I started a vodka company. We produce our own vodka, like Polish vodka was produced 100 or 200 years ago. I hope nobody's here from any big vodka companies. Anybody here from a big vodka company? Stand up and let yourself be known now. Okay, nobody. I can say it. Most commercial vodka is industrial, in that it's tastes the same, one company as another, pretty much, because it's distilled and it's rectified 4 times. When you rectify it, you take all of the interesting things out of it. So we make vodka like vodka was made in Poland 100, 200 years ago. We distill it once, so you get flavors. We put a rocznik, a vintage on our vodka, because you cannot make the same vodka year on year. It's like wine. It depends on the climate. It depends the amount of rainfall, all sorts of things. So we make a vodka which has the vintage on it, and over the past 5 years we've started exporting it to, we're in England, we're in France, America, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the idea of the vintage is beginning to take on, and we have, I see competitors in Poland now using the idea of the vintage, which we started 5 or 6 years ago. I was asked to come here because I've just written a book about all of these things, about envelopes and women and life in the fast lane, dealing with farmers. And it was actually published in English last year. the White Lake, because that's the name, Jezioro Białe, where we live in Kashubia. And today is a very auspicious day because the Polish version came out, Nad Jeziorem Białym, and that will be available, this is another small advertisement, that will be available in MPIC, because MPIC owns the publishing company, etc. I brought some copies here today. If you want to know about envelopes and vodka and fighting the local Układ, etc., you are most welcome to buy a book. The best value is the Polish version because it's half the price of the English version. Don't ask me why. But if you speak Polish, buy the Polish version. It's a good deal. I will sign any copies that you like. I'm sorry I have to sell them, but hey, we're poor Kashubian farmers. We need to make a buck when we can. So hand over the money. If you don't have any money, you can give me your business card, and one of my girls in the office will call you and send a couple of Ukrainians with baseball bats if you haven't paid. Sorry, I hope there's no Ukrainians here. I don't mean any disrespect to Ukrainians. I really like them and everything. So I won't keep you any further. If you want to talk to me, I think everybody should get on with eating. I can tell you a lot more about the story of the lodge and the various things that I've started here in Poland and my life in Poland. I'll speak to you and have a good time this evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, John. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.